Hello and welcome to this month's guest interview with Martin Bailey. Martin Bailey and I first met each other, I believe, in the Arcanum, Trey Ratcliffe's education platform, sadly, which I believe has been closed now for 2 years. I get confused. Yeah. But welcome, Martin. I'm really looking forward to having a chat tonight about photography and about the print.
Thank you, Ron. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, and we haven't really had a chance to catch up since those days, and I'm really looking forward to having a chat tonight. And it's going to meander. Martin and I didn't have a structured plan about what to talk about. I know I have many students in my mentoring platform who had questions about printing and are very curious about printing, and Martin happens to know quite a bit about this. Martin is not just a photographer, but a podcaster, a tour leader, fine art printer, X-Rite Colorati, and a Capture One ambassador, to name a few of the things he does, as well as an all-around nice guy who happens to also be joining us from Japan. And so all kinds of really cool stuff. Welcome, Martin.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you. It's nice to be here. And hello, everybody.
Just to get started, Martin, just a couple of really quick questions there of the day. Today happens to be a very important day for a lot of people. That's the U.S. Presidential elections. How does that affect you guys over there? Are you guys plugged into that? Is that a major deal for you guys, or how do you guys feel about that?
Well, Japan is very, very much into, the news is full of it at the moment. Most of the time, pretty much every news show has at least one section on U.S. politics and the various things. I try not to talk politics about who I would support, who I don't, but I think that the Japanese media are very anti-Trump. Although the previous Prime Minister of Japan was the first person to go and visit him when he was elected. So they seem to have, the government are very much involved with the US. I mean, obviously, Japan and the US go back the history from after the war and everything. Everything changed during after the war, and in the right way. There are many things that have affected how the Japanese have taught history and things like that. But they have a very good relationship with the US now. It probably wasn't so good when they bombed Pearl Harbor, but they, it's a with the people as well. It's a bit of a love-hate relationship. Some people try to portray that Japan was kind of cultivated as a herd of people to make money from by the US. There were people, there was a show years ago, and I'm digressing a little bit now, but there was a show a few years ago about how the US came in and sold grain to Japan as a way to make money from them. But the opposite side of that is Japan after the war was really struggling. There were people starving, and the US had a lot of land. So they came in and they literally drove around villages in vans showing the housewives how to bake bread. And that gave the US a market for the flour, but it also gave Japan a way to feed their children. And, so it was a win-win thing. And their people are looking, people in the Midwest in the US are very proud of the fact that they were able to help Japan after the war. And so it's, there's lots of sides to all arguments and all everything that you hear about. So good relationship with some slightly strange areas.
Yeah, I try to take a fairly high level view, but being in Canada, we're deeply affected by everything they do. I guess it was our one of our previous prime ministers, actually the father of our current prime minister, said living beside the United States is like sleeping with an elephant. And if they roll over, you sure know it. So I think they've been doing a lot of rolling lately.
Oh yes, yeah.
I want to get into this topic of a print. We touched on a few things. Yeah, when we in the pre-show, we touched on a few things, and I just wanted to bring that up. And this is actually one of the number one things that I hear from people who send in for print, and it comes back not the way they saw it. They maybe they're not familiar with printing, or sometimes even they are, and they send in this file that they are in love with. They send it into a printer. Maybe they've never used them. Maybe they've used them 100 times before, but the print comes back and the result is really disappointing. I'm going to show you this one print. So the lab I work with, one of the labs I work with, has always done a pretty decent job of printing for me. And I sent them 4 files, and 3 of them came back really well. I can't show you by turning the camera, but I have a large print on the wall over here, and a really large print on the wall over there. And the big prints, one was on metal, one was on canvas, another was on print. They all came back perfectly. And then this print came back, as you can see, looking like this. And so that was a disappointment. And I was talking to the lab, and I said, is there a way you can help me know for sure when I do the print how it's going to come back? Because this isn't usable for me. I can't frame this. And the advice given to me by this lab, I'm not going to say their name, was, well, you just have to edit it brighter. Well, what are your thoughts on that, Martin?
Yeah, so in a way, they're right, but it's the wrong answer if you're trying to help someone. So most people that have problems with printing, the main problem is that the prints come out dark. And it is a global conspiracy. It's driven by a number of factors. The first one is that the camera manufacturers make cameras that are still using algorithms from the film ages, from the film era, which is in some ways fine, but it doesn't maximize the quality and the printability of your images. So essentially what's going to happen is, if you just leave your camera in an automated mode and you don't do anything to brighten the images up, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment, what you'll end up with is an image where all of the data, if you look at the histogram, you have the histogram like this, the majority of the data will be in the middle. And that means that it's on a scale of 0 to 255, which is what is often used for these digital things. It's around 128, and that means it's going to be smack between the pure black and pure white. And so that's the camera. The camera will do that if you don't give it a helping hand. When you look at that image, so from that point, assuming you didn't give it a helping hand, your images will be sort of middle of the road, dark, neither dark nor light. But the next thing that's going to happen is you'll open that photograph on your computer, and when you look at it without doing any sort of calibration or setting the monitor as you really need to do to get good prints, it's going to look fine. It's going to look like, oh, nice, bright looking image, because your display is probably turned up very, very brightly. Most computers come with the display, like a MacBook Pro comes with the computer display turned up to around 80%. Yeah. Most displays, desktop displays, they come out of the factory with the brightness way up at around 80%, some even at 100%, but normally around 70 to 80%. And that's above average brightness. So you look at your images on those bright monitors and they look fine. But then in reality, the camera has recorded something that's actually much darker. You don't know about it because of the display. So then when you send that to the printer, it's going to come back looking dark because the printer has just printed what you gave it. It's given you 128 mid-gray instead of a a lighter one. Now, the only way that you can actually do, well, there's two ways to do anything about this. And some printers, they, as you mentioned, Ron, they recommended that you brighten the image up. Lightroom, in a number of, maybe 5 years or so ago, did something that I, as an avid printer, really didn't like, and they put a brightness slider on the print module, and I was really sad to see that, but it was a way of helping the majority of people that make photographs. And this is not like you should or should not do this or that, but the majority of people make photographs that are in the middle of the histogram. That's how the cameras are set up to work. So the brightness slider was actually a way, if you took it and make like one stop, and if we consider one stop of exposure as from ISO from 100 to 200 or 200 to 400, or your aperture from f8 to f5.6, you know, introducing one stop of brightness, that's usually enough to make an image look a lot closer to what people expect to see. And that's one way of doing it. So you could take your image and just increase the exposure. I like to use exposure rather than brightness, because brightness it works slightly differently on the images. Exposure actually emulates changing the exposure in the camera. But if you take that back a step further, one of the ways that I shoot, and I'm sure you've heard of a technique, that it's an acronym. The acronym is ETTR, and it stands for exposed to the right. And what that basically is it's a way of photographing that will, and this is going to sound elitist, but I can actually talk further about the technical reasons why this happens. But exposing to the right actually gives you better quality images. Now, of course, that's a technical statement. You know, I could photograph I don't know, something really bad and a really bad content of the photograph, but technically the image is better quality. And the reason for that is because on a histogram, if you take a histogram, the way digital photos, and this is like overly geeking out at the moment, but I won't go on this too much, but the way photographs are stored, if you break a photograph into 10 segments, then the top 10% gets, or the brightest 10% gets half of the data for that image. And so it's the best 10% to be recording your image in. The second 10% gets half of that again. So say, for example, if we continue to use the digital 0 to 255 example, it's obviously much greater amount of data, but so the top 10% gets 128 bits of data to record the quality of the image. The second 10% gets 64, then 32, 16. So by the time you get to the middle 10% or 20%, you're down to like 4 and 8 bits of data compared to 128, which is at the top, the brightest part. And then below that, you're really low. And so the less data you have to write the image in, the more noise you get, because the camera has to write it. They actually add grain at 100, an ISO 100. They actually add grain to make the image look more organic, but it's not visible until you start to amplify the image. And then we get into things like ISO, what is it, the native ISO stuff and all of the ISO performance. And we're probably diving a little bit too far down the rabbit hole. So I'll stop there for a moment. But that's basically what happens. So to sort of bring it right around, if you were to expose to the right, which is the way I've been shooting for like 15 years or so now, then your images on your computer are actually, they would look a lot brighter. But if you calibrate it's here. So if you use a device to calibrate your monitor, this is a very expensive version, and these are like the best you can get, but you can get similar things for like 120 bucks, and they all do a great job. During that process, they will ask you at some point if you would like to adjust the brightness of your monitor. And so what you need to do, and this is the magic bullet, is to use something like that to find out how bright your monitor should be for the ambient light in your environment. And
Yes.
and then I see lots of air punching here. This is good. So you set your monitor for your ambient light, and then I find that, I mean, I've got two displays here. My Apple display is at about 38%, and I've got another display that's right in front of me right now. This is the brightness on this is down at 25%, and that is the right lightness for this environment. And another important thing, and something that people often overlook, is auto brightness is fine. I actually recommend people leave auto brightness on, especially on a laptop where you're moving around from various environments. The important thing is you have it on when you set the computer up, so that the computer, not the computer, the calibration. Have it on auto brightness and adjust the brightness to the baseline when you find out when you calibrate, and at that point you will give yourself a baseline for the computer to adjust the brightness from. So if it gets brighter, the computer will darken your no, the other way around. It'll brighten up your display so that you can still see it. If it gets darker, it'll darken it down so that it looks fine. But it's all working from a baseline, and so it's just adjusting the computer display to match your eyes. Now, if you don't have a device, or you don't want to, you don't have a need to buy something like this, just try darkening your display down to around 50%, or between 30 and 50%. And see what happens. That's generally around where you need to be.
Yeah. What I did discover, and I thought I had done that with this image, I don't often go back to my MacBook to edit. I edit here at this desktop, and I don't always put the brightness down. I kind of rely on my histogram, and I know where my images are, and I understand printing. So I thought this would come back okay. But if I was on my MacBook, I know I have to be at nearly half brightness. So I 4 dots down, whatever that is, of the 12, 4 dots down, and I'm almost at half, and it seems too dark. Yet when I edit with that in mind, so what I will do is I'll actually create a subfolder in Lightroom and say for print. And so I'll take my finished files, drop them in there, and make adjustments to them specifically to have the print done, because it will look very different on social media than it would when I send it to the printer. And so there's two things I do, and you can let me know if this is good or bad or ugly. I edit them on my darker monitor so that I see more accurately what it would look like on printed paper than a backlit screen. And I also pull the shadow area of my curve up a little bit, because I know that with printing, the dark 30%, that bottom 30% really compresses. It really squishes that last, which I think is a big problem with this print. I'll hold it up again. The print is 90%, that bottom 30%. And it just pushed it right down, right to the bottom. So what I normally would do is just bring that shadows, and even my blacks I might bring up, as long as they're still hitting 0, pull that up a little bit.
Yeah. So I generally try to avoid complete full black. I will always leave it a very dark gray. But I actually, what I did, and I'm going to just, I mean, this is literally just a photograph from a walk in the park last week. But if I could just share my screen for a moment.
Yeah. Let me turn that on for you.
Actually, you know what? That might not work so well, because I want to compare. So you see the print on the whiteboard back there.
Yeah.
Let me go and
go ahead.
No, it's all tacked on there. So that print is this photograph. And it actually, this webcam is actually adjusting for the light slightly, so I
Yeah.
might have to show. And plus, you're looking at it on your own displays.
That's
so,
right. So
so it means if your display is too bright, then it won't really show. But that photograph, the point here is that photograph, I printed it yesterday just as a test in preparation, and I didn't do any adjustment at all. And the reason for that is because I exposed to the right. And what I'll do is I will share my screen so that I can show you something else.
yeah,
Um,
please do.
if I
While you're
just,
doing that, I do have a question from Julie. She said she has a new iMac that adjusts the screen display to account for ambient light. How does this impact both Lightroom and the calibration?
so the calibration usually, if you've calibrated, if you have a calibration tool, what I would recommend is actually during the calibration, there's usually an option to set or to give you guidance on setting the setting the brightness of the display. If you use that, what they do with this is they actually ask you to point the sensor to the light or towards the light source. And I usually point it not directly, because I have, if I open you see how bright it gets in here.
Light, yeah.
So if I point it towards the window, it's actually too bright. But I have like plain lace curtains to diffuse the light that comes into here a little. And I sort of point it halfway between there and the light of the room. And I measure the light in my environment and then set my display to match that. So if you've got a calibration device, that's what you really ideally would like to do. If you don't have a calibration device, I mean, I've just checked my iMac, and in here it's at about 35%, and that gives me, and like I say, I leave the auto brightness on.
Yeah.
But in this light today, it's at about 35%. And the calibration, the actual colors themselves don't really change it with the brightness. They, how we perceive them is different, but the computer won't really do anything different with the colors or change the calibration. It doesn't nullify anything that you've done by changing the brightness. But ideally, if you are calibrating, you want to be calibrating with the brightness set to the amount that the calibration tool also sees, just so that it knows and it can take everything into account.
Yeah.
One thing that I don't do, and this is kind of important as well, is some calibration tools will ask you if you want to modify or to change the tint or the hue of the calibration based on, don't do that. You want it to be standard, and unless you are printing for an exhibition and you know that there's some strange lighting in there, and you also know that you're not going to use those prints for anything else, then that in that situation it's okay to adjust the calibration just to match light. But generally, when you have no idea, it's best to not turn that on. So that's an extra thing there. So
Good.
let's see.
Yeah, you were going
to. I was going to let me just
yeah.
open this up. Desktop one. Let me know when you can see that.
Yeah, it's showing up for us.
Okay, so this is again, like I said, this is the photo that I just showed you, and again, this is being displayed on your the brightness that you have your display set to. But an important thing to think about and to look at is the histogram. So if we look up in the top left here, I probably should have changed the resolution of my display before I shared it so that you can see this better. But if you look at the top here, you'll see that we have information. There's a big chunk of information down on the left, which is the shadow areas. And I've actually added a bit of a vignette to this. But the important thing is that your data for the color and for the brighter main subject comes all the way across to the right side. And I'm
Yeah.
just going to go through and select a few. Here's a few images from, so for example, this one, and again, I'll show you, this is one of the Himba people in Namibia. If you look again,
Yeah.
the histogram is way down on the left side, but it's because I've darkened this down in the corners here. So if I show you if I create a new variant without any adjustments, this is my original image. So you see the
Mhm.
difference here. So the person, this young lady, I've not changed the brightness of her at all, but I've changed the brightness of the image there. If we look at the histogram of the original, we actually have much more data here. You
Yeah.
generally with Lightroom, and this is Capture One, but with Lightroom as well, you'll generally have about one stop of data on the right side, which is the software working its magic and giving you a little bit more. But in this
Yeah.
situation, I was actually exposing. I set my camera so that it was the whites of her eyes were just starting to overexpose a little. But again, the point here was going to be that I will expose to the right, but sometimes for mood, I will darken an image down. And so that's
Yeah.
doing two things. It's, obviously for me, it's enhancing the mood of the photograph, but it's also masking. This photograph was shot, this is actually not so bad. This is at ISO 2000. If I go back a little in time, I'm not sure if I have these in here. So let me just,
I was just
yeah,
going to
so
say,
here.
with regard to that, there's
Mhm.
when I expose as well, especially if I have to expose at higher ISOs, I really prefer to push to the right and
Mm,
bring back, pull down the exposure later than to
exactly,
try and cheat to get a lower ISO, make my
exactly.
image dark, and then try to bump it up, because that then you have this issue where there's very little data to pull from, and you introduce all that digital noise.
You hit it right on the head there, Ron. So that's exactly what happens. This one was at ISO 5000, and a lot of people, and this was shot when 3 years ago, so the cameras were getting good on ISO anyway. But at ISO, if I zoom in here, I'm not sure how much you'll be able to see, but if you look, say the highlights in the teeth and her eyes are very close to overexposing. And so that's when I'm talking about exposed to the right, I don't
Yeah.
forfeit the highlights to do that. I expose until the highlights are on the right side or just starting to blow out.
Yeah.
Um, but the other thing is, you'll see that there's very little grain in this image. And this was with a 5DSR, so 50 megapixel camera at ISO 5000. And there's very little grain
Wow.
in the image.
That's
Um, and so
yeah.
that's because I was exposing to the right, even though it left a lot of the data on the left side of the histogram. Exposing until the highlights are just starting to blow out will give you as good an image quality as possible. But again, this is the original. So it was actually brighter, and I darkened it down slightly. And as Ron
Yes.
just said, that also helps to mask any grain that you might get. But being afraid to increase the ISO in dark environments will always give you more grain. If I was to have shot
Yeah.
this at ISO 3200 just to give me a brighter image, I would have actually had more grain because the image data would be further into the shadows.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Very, very good.
that was just to sort of show you there. I'm not sure if there's anything else that. This was another one. This is actually a Himba lady taking a bath. The tarpaulin, the canvas around her lower half she's smoking her private parts. So so that's how they take a bath. They literally they burn sticks, put them into a can, and then cover their lower body with the canvas, and it smokes them, and that basically gets rid of any smells. So these people don't bathe in water. They don't have water around them. So and they actually are surprisingly not, they don't smell. I've been in a vehicle with 4 Himba ladies, and they didn't smell badly or anything. So it works.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I've always wanted to go visit them. So
Yeah. Oh, they're amazing people to work with. This is the same girl that was in the photo earlier. I've been photographing her since she was a small child, and my goal is to get at least one set of photos with her when she's got her own child.
Oh, that'll be wonderful.
So,
yeah, what a series.
Yeah.
Be really wonderful.
Yeah. So I'll stop sharing my screen for now. We can go back to that if you want.
Yeah, we can go back to it
if you want to look at anything else.
Yeah. We'll come up with some other questions too, because I know Cindy, you put a question in the comment section of the event, and feel free to ask that question here of Martin. Go ahead.
Martin, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Hi, Cindy.
Hi. I read your podcasts about the Luma River.
Oh yeah.
Camera profile, and I could see on my monitor the difference between your 2 profiles, but I'm wondering how much you really get for your $100 to buy the software. Could you just increase the saturation a little and get there pretty close, or do you really think it's worth it?
It's worth it to people. I mean, I honestly don't think it's necessary. I think it's something that, if you say, for example, if you're working in commercial photography and you have to produce images that are 100% color accurate, then it's probably it's a good investment. If you are a fine art photographer and you're photographing for yourself, and you don't necessarily need a red to be an exact same red as what the catalog is going to look like and things like that, if you don't have to key in your color to that degree, I wouldn't worry about it. And X-Rite, the color people, they invited me into their band of merry men called the Colorati, and that's it's a play on paparazzi. So apparently, so they invited me in there many years ago, and they would be greatly unhappy if they heard me say this. But to be honest, cameras now are so much better than they were even 10 years ago. 20 years ago, when I bought my first digital camera, a 3 megapixel camera that cost more than my 5 EOS R5 now, that camera produced very, very poor quality raw images. The JPEGs were pumped up a little bit because they're more commercial. They're more for the amateur who wants a bit more punch. But raw images have become the norm. And even 10 years ago, raw images were a little bit flatter, and they needed more help. But now, if I'm completely honest, they don't need that help anymore. So unless you're trying to key in your color for a specific commercial use, it's not that big a deal. I wouldn't buy that. I wouldn't go through the process if, say, for example, unless I was doing something that sort of commercial work. To be honest, I mean, I report on that because I know that some people do want to key that in, and some people, I mean, I was asked a specific question that led me to re-release that or to do an updated version of that process. And plus, they've made a few changes that make it really easy to do. But I didn't go into the actual reasons for doing it, which is something that someone mentioned I probably should have done. And I would say, yes, it's $100 you could use for something else. Unless you have a reason why you really want to key in that color, I wouldn't worry about it. I'm using the profile in Capture One now, and I will continue to use it because it's slightly, as you mentioned, it's,
You see the
you know,
difference.
the colors are slightly more vibrant. They're more accurate, but accurate in a fine art photo, it's not necessarily what we have is already very, very good. And yes, if you want it to be a little bit more vibrant, then you can pump up the vibrance or the, I mean, I still do that. I have two monitors. The one that I'm looking towards at the moment is has full RGB color. The iMac has closer to sRGB. And when I look at photographs such as, for example, even though these displays are both calibrated, when I look at the photograph of, say, the butterfly that I shot in the park last week on the Adobe RGB display, it's much more vibrant. I can see colors that I don't see on my iMac screen. And this is an iMac Pro. It's only 2 years old. So, yeah. But if I only look at the image on the iMac, it looks fine. I can't tell the difference until I switch between the two. Yeah. And when you consider that the base image is still a standard color, it's going to look different on different people's displays, but everyone gets used to what you're looking at. So as long as your calibration is not way out, I don't think, especially with regards to your question, Cindy, the Luma River thing, it's necessary if you're working in an environment where you have to key in your color 100%. Otherwise, I wouldn't worry too much about it.
That kind of brings me to a thing like when I'm looking at images, like a lot of people will say, oh, it's got those Canon colors or that lens has a specific color. But I think when our primary audience is the internet and everything gets compressed to sRGB, you'd be hard pressed to tell me what image came from where and what processing software you used. You, for example, you're a representative for Capture One, and I know it's a really good raw processor. It's a very good program. I don't use it myself. I use the Adobe workflow, and so I'm into Lightroom. But I know some people that just swear by Capture One, and so I always come to back to the argument that when I look at an image and I'm able to say, "Wow, I can see that's a Capture One image," maybe then that's enough of a difference for me to change. Instead of just chasing everything that looks like the next shiny object. And so I kind of stay the course. I always want to try Capture One, but I have a workflow that's working. So I wonder if I would actually really know the difference in my output in the end.
So this is another, I mean, I'm not saying this because I'm an ambassador, but my experience was, I was very happy with, as you Ron. I was into Lightroom from the very first beta, and I used Lightroom until I think version, was it 9? I want to say, maybe less. I can't remember, but it was 4 years ago, and the Capture One or the Phase One team had been emailing me a license for Capture One for about 4 years, saying, Martin, we want you to take a look at this. Martin, take a look. And I said, yeah, okay, I'll put some time aside at some point and take a look. And I left it for 4 years. And then when they released a new version on around the 5th year, they didn't send me a license. And I thought, okay, maybe I should take a look at this.
Yeah.
And I thought, I looked at it and I emailed the person that had been emailing me a license for the last 4 years. And she said, oh yeah, Martin, we'd love for you to take a look. Here's a license. And what I did was I put an afternoon aside. I thought I'm going to make sure that I actually do take a good look. And I took 50 images that are basically, they were my favorite images and ones that I'd had a good memory of for a while. And I opened up, I'm not sure, I might be able to show you this, but I would only be showing you it in Capture One. But I opened up these 50 images, and I was immediately, the first image I looked at was, I can show you the image, but I can't necessarily show you the original processing. Let me just go to my Wildlife of Japan.
Yeah, because I'll be honest, I installed it and I ended up
Um,
letting the free trial expire before I really had a chance to put it through any work. And
So, well, the thing is I looked at one photograph. The first photograph I looked at, I'll try and find it in a moment. It was a crane. I love to photograph images where you can hardly see the difference between the certain tones. So the white neck of the crane, I need to actually find this and show it you, but
yeah,
the white neck of the crane against I'm gonna, rather than trying to do two things at once, which I'm terrible at because I'm a man and we don't do two things. We're not very good at multiple
I'm just the
multitasking.
same.
Let me, oh, it's got to be in here somewhere. Here we go. So I'm going to share my screen again quickly. I could probably, if we're really interested, I could probably go and find the original as a JPEG. But basically, can you see that?
Yeah.
So this image here was, if you look down the right side, we can and here as well, we can see that the tones are very similar. We've got at some points, like here on the right side, there where the background snow is almost the same color as the tones of the bird. But when I looked at this image, this was the first one I opened in Capture One Pro, and I for the first time ever was able to see detail in the bird's feathers. I couldn't see these filaments, and again, I don't know if you can actually see it here.
I'm seeing it
But
in my, and I got to tell you, I photograph a lot of penguins. So
yeah,
this is one thing when I get this specific lighting situation, especially when it's a bit overcast. This is an area where I really struggle when in real life you see the definition and then in the final product, especially if you get a bit of that sun peeking through. I really relate to the loss of data at the very high end of the fidelity, like the lightest.
yeah.
Feathers
So
are iridescent.
when I first shot this, and I'm going to try and find a JPEG of my original processing. When I first shot this and processed it in Lightroom, I didn't see any of that detail. It just wasn't there. So, oh, look at this. I've replaced my old JPEG as well. It's on my blog somewhere, but
Yeah.
So I saw detail in this bird that I was not aware was even in the image. And that to me was a cause for me to look more. And I took 50 images, went through them all, and I just saw detail and things and things in the photographs that I hadn't even been aware. So if you can process in Lightroom to bring out more detail, but if you're not aware that the detail is there, it's hard to know what you're trying to bring out.
Work for it, yeah.
Yeah, but Capture One gives you the detail and everything to begin with, and then you can decide. I actually toned it down in this image slightly because I was used to seeing my original, the original version, and so it showed me stuff that I was not aware was there, and that was the big eye opener for me. So again, I understand the Lightroom workflow, the Adobe workflow is it's established and it's great, and your images still look absolutely stunning, Ron. So I'm not, and everyone, I don't try to convert people to Capture One Pro, but my own story is that, I literally saw more detail in my work. So I decided to jump. I uninstalled Lightroom a week later, and I haven't installed it since.
It's a testament.
So yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that I would use it for, and I watched another photographer recently do a headshot session during COVID for a corporation. And he was able to, with an additional piece of software, Capture One is a much better tethering program than Lightroom. Lightroom's just really all heck. And Capture One is an excellent tethering program. And he was able to actually have an iPad on a stand where he could take the photographs and then transmit them to the iPad, where the client, without getting within 6 or 12 feet of him, was able to
Mm.
make their selections back to his computer.
Mm.
And then he was able to, on the spot, work with this group of people. And I thought, that's brilliant technology. Like, for all the years Lightroom has had to perfect this, why have they not perfected tethering the way that Capture One has?
Yeah,
And so
I
that's
mean,
another
you can
thing I'm
you can
interested in.
tether you can tether with various ways depending on your system, and Canon has their own version as well. But it takes a lot of setting up, and a lot of the time it can be hit and miss, and the network connection doesn't quite
Yeah.
happen the way they expect it to. And Capture One, it's one press. You if your camera is supported, and most of them are, you connect your camera, and if Capture One is open when you connect it, it will say, do you want to tether? You say yes, bang, you've got a tethered screen, and that's it. You're
Yeah.
in, and you've got control over your camera. You can change the focus, you can change the settings, everything, all from Capture One, and it just stores the images straight into your session, so it works really well.
Yeah, that's literally, I think, gonna be the tipper for me. Even if I don't use it as my catalog, my whole workflow, it's absolutely going to become part of it in the future. But
The
when you
only
show me
thing
the
that
bird, that's a huge
I'm
one, because I have so many images of birds with white iridescent feathers where I'm
Mm,
pushing the limit of the capture. I know there's detail there, but yeah, I'm
mm.
like you, I didn't see it.
Yeah, it was very, very impressive. The other things that I enjoyed was that, I mean, let me tell you two things that I miss. One is that, I mean, I print from Capture One Pro. You just said, Ron, that you probably wouldn't move your whole catalog there. I'm very binary. I'm 0 or 1. I'm on
Yeah,
or off. So if I'm a Capture One user, Lightroom gets killed.
yeah,
If I'm a Mac user, I sold my Windows computers.
yeah,
Yeah, so everything I do, I'm one way or the other. And I from the start wanted to make Capture One the core of my workflow. And so, but I was disappointed that at the time, and I believe this is still pretty much the case, Lightroom had a really good database at the back of it, an engine, and it could store like millions of photographs if you had them.
yeah,
And I
it
used
does.
to have everything in there. But Capture One, I can get about a year's photographs in one catalog, and then I have to start again. So I did change the way I work. But what I also do, and what I've been doing for years, is I have this one hard an SSD.
Yeah,
You can probably see it's got finals written on it.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so into here, I copy all of my final selects. And so I've got everything that I've shot, even from some old scans from the 90s. Everything that I've ever shot that's worth a hoot is on this hard drive. So I can go through and by year and select all of my portfolios, and everything are all in this hard drive.
yeah,
So I have one catalog that has everything, but all of my original shoots where by month, year, month, and day, I keep those on a second hard drive. This is called my Traveler. And
yeah,
so the reason this is called a Traveler is because it travels with me around the world, but also it travels between computers. So I have my catalog on here and all of the photos for the current year. And if I plug this into my laptop, it opens up at the same place in Capture One. And if I take this to close it down and move it to my iMac, it opens up at the same place, and I
yeah.
can just continue to work. And these are I have two of them the same. They're relatively expensive. They're like $700 for 2 terabytes, but these are
Yeah.
incredibly fast, and so everything
Yeah, I
works
was
very
gonna
well from there.
show you. I work with this Western Digital. It's a SSD,
Yeah,
2
yeah. So,
terabyte wireless, and then I mirror it when I'm traveling. I have a mirror that's just a regular drive, but
mm,
that holds my current year, my
mm.
current working files. And again, it has
So,
my Lightroom library on it, so no matter where I plug it in, it just
mm.
fires up to where I was working.
So
And I'm one of these
there was
people,
one
I'm
of the
a
things.
this and that person. I have Mac and PC, I have up
Yeah.
and down, I have in and out.
I wish I was. So I said there were two things that I didn't like. One was the catalog, the ability of the catalog to store, and the other one was, as I say, printing. Lightroom was better for printing, but because I'm binary, I wanted to print from Capture One, and
Yeah.
it's okay, but it doesn't handle templates quite as well, and sometimes the team don't test it well enough, and something drops out for a while. Right now, it's pretty solid, and so I am printing from Capture One. But those were the two areas that I found were a little bit weaker.
Yeah, because I don't yet have a home printer, just an office printer that I can print little coupons on. I keep searching for a great lab. And I have to say, I'm working right now for portraits. And just give me a second, because I'm going to grab it and show you the night and day difference.
Hmm.
Let me just pull this. My group have mostly seen this image, but I'll pull this out. And I'm trying to find a place in the United States that does this printing, because I have to go to Italy to get it right now. It's called Dreamlabo.
Hmm.
Is that the name? Am I getting that right, Marjorie? Dreamlabo, Dreambolo, Dreamlabo? But it's
I have no
a
idea.
kind of printing, and it manages darks very well. So I'd hold that up. And,
Oh,
and
yeah, yeah.
the dynamic range in this, if you saw this in person, Martin, you would inadvertently just want to touch it. Like everybody that's
Yeah.
seen it wants to touch it. And the night and day difference, like when I sent out this image, and then I got this image back from Italy, and the price difference wasn't that great. I mean, except for
Yeah.
I got this on what's known as a mega mat, so there was some difference, but
Yeah, it's beautiful.
I don't know the process where they're getting that kind of fidelity out of a dark image. It's just remarkable, the detail right to black.
So
And I
some
think it's called-
printers.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I was going to say, I think it's, I don't know if Marjorie's still there. I'm trying to get her to. I think it's
I have no idea.
Dreamlabo.
I have no
Oh.
idea what it is. I could try and find it, but
Yeah,
I will make an attempt.
Don't worry about it. It was just that when I send prints to them and I order that particular process, every time my mind just goes pop. If I could do that at home, oh boy.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure those printers are multiple tens of thousands of dollars right now.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let me show you. This is going to probably, if I can go back to.
Yeah. So the point of that anyway was that I ended up experimenting with labs and generally have like these 3 labs I work with, because everything is predictable until they send me something like the first image I showed you today. And then you go, well, what happened?
So a lab that's worth its salt will generally be able to adjust things if necessary. And a tone curve will fix a dark image.
Yeah.
As you mentioned earlier, Ron, dark images do sometimes you lose fidelity a little bit because the black inks don't reflect. Printing is when we look at images on a display, it's backlit. Light is being pushed through the colors. Yeah. On a print, it relies on the light that hits the print to reflect back. And so obviously it's harder for the paper to reflect anything back if it's got black ink over it. But it's doable. And I actually do very little soft proofing. And this was what I was going to talk about earlier. Soft proofing is a way to, when you mentioned earlier about, is there a way for the lab to help you to understand what your image is going to look like? They could send you the ICC profile that they're using for printing on any specific media. And if they do that, you can load that into Lightroom or Capture One or whatever you're using and soft proof to see which images will print okay and which won't. But that on a very related, I'm going to share my screen.
Actually, since you mentioned that, I did used to use soft proofing with one of the labs I worked with and was very pleased with the results I was getting back from them.
Yeah. So this is obviously not me. but I have a photo here. I'm showing you this for two reasons. Can you see the photo?
Yeah, yeah.
So this guy hired me last year. We did 12 of his prints, some of them like 6 foot tall. But the 4 prints on the ground were the first 4 that we did in like a workshop session. I do a pixels to pigment workshop over a weekend. Normally with 4 people, this guy paid me for 4 people's worth, so that we did it was like a one-to-one workshop for the weekend. But there are 2 reasons I'm showing you this. One is the printer. Behind him is my printer. So it's like 44 inches wide. It uses 44-inch wide media.
Yeah.
The media that you see here is when wrapped like that is 20 inches. So like over double that width is the maximum width that I can print on. But also these were very, very processed. These images were like they were photographs originally of rusty panels on vehicles and sidings and things.
Wow.
And he took them and created completely wacky colors, and so they were totally man-made, and these were very, very difficult to print. We actually have to soft proof and adjust these images for about 30 minutes each. For most of my work, I don't even soft proof anymore because the printer just prints it. But for stuff that is a little bit out there, like HDR photography or stuff where the colors have been manipulated a lot, then yes, you can soft proof. And I mean, basically what soft proofing is, if I just quickly show you here, and I'll go to a more colorful image so that we can perhaps see the I don't know, this guy here. Still not very colorful, but this collection. I I'll leave it there. So soft proofing in Capture One, I've got a proofing button up here.
Yeah.
Okay, before I do that, what you have to do is to go to your recipes, and I have here. So for example, I have a recipe here that is for a breathing color media called Pura Smooth. If you select that and it has the ICC profile of a printing for printing selected, then you hit proofing. You'll see it changes very slightly. It gets a little bit brighter actually.
Yeah.
But that would, if I had images, if I had anything in there that would not print, it will show you warnings, or you can see the color changing significantly because the printer doesn't know how to print a specific color. So what you can do is get the profile for the printing process that the lab is using and load it onto your computer, select it here, and then turn on proofing. And you can do this in Lightroom as well. And that shows you the image after. We can also, here now, we have a before after slider in the latest version of Capture One. So I can actually take a look here and see, I can make adjustments if I wanted to. So if I want to adjust this for print, I could say go in. I'm going to make a copy of this so that I don't mess up my original, which has gone where? Can't even find my original photo. Here we go. So I'm going to make a quick copy of this. But for example, if I wanted to, I could go in and say I don't like the fact that the reds or the oranges in the fox have gone a little bit paler here. What I could do is either just take the saturation and bring it up a little bit, and you can see as I increase the saturation, it's making it the left side a little bit similar to the right, not a lot. But the other thing you can do, if you wanted to, is use. Where's it gone?
Yeah, and this is interesting too. If it had shown you had colors that were out of the printing range, you could make adjustments to bring them back into the printing range
Exactly.
before sending
so-
it out.
So here we have, actually, I need to turn this off for a moment. So here I've gone to the advanced color editor. We can select that particular color and increase the saturation just of the reds. And you can see that's taking them way over. If I go up really high, just to show you.
Yes, yes.
So I can bring the saturation back. And then if we go back to the before after, oh, actually it's showing me the after is on the right.
After,
and I
yeah.
wanted to, okay, but you see what I'm saying.
Yeah,
So
I get what you're
you
saying.
can increase it and make it more closer to what the proofing version would look like.
Yeah.
So here we go. That's before proofing, and that's with proofing turned off.
Yeah.
And so you can try to bring it more in line with what you were hoping to get from the image. And that's how it works basically. You look at what it's going, what the profile is likely to give you, and then adjust the image to bring it in line. And sometimes I will, I call it flying in the face of the gamut gods. And so if an image is out of gamut, which is basically the term for when the printer cannot print a specific color, if you take the color even further past, it will sometimes drop back down to something closer. So I sometimes increase the saturation or change colors to the point where they look pretty bad in the proof, but when you print them, the printer's best effort is actually closer to what you were hoping for.
Well, that's an interesting point. Yeah. Well, we've come up to an hour, and I don't like to keep people. I know that I just saw that Margaret had to go, and Lori has to go, but I'm going to bring you back, and I'm just going to open it up to, if you want to unmute and you have any specific questions for Martin, now's a great time to ask that. And I'm going to take us off of the spotlight. That's what we're going to do. Take the spotlight away and come back as a group here. Gallery view. There, now we're all a big group again on my side. Okay, Greg, you said you got to drop off. Thanks for joining us. Printing, we can go on and on and on and on about printing. Boy, it's a big topic. I've developed a pretty simple method here, but I actually want to buy a printer, nothing really outstanding, probably a Canon Pro 1000, up to 17 inches for some of the portraits I do. But when I see these prints I get back from Italy, I ask myself, well, why bother? They've got it figured out. I just send the file and back comes. I mean, it's expensive, but it also doesn't take any time.
It really depends on how much. I mean, I like making things, as in, like as a kid, I enjoyed just whittling a piece of wood down to something, and I like making things with my hands, and so I enjoy. I mean, like last night was, to be completely honest, the first time I'd printed for a few months, and I fired up the printer because we were going to talk today, and I thought, I'll just throw something out just to make sure that the printer's okay and all that, and watching the printer move, even when I put a new roll of paper media in it, the printer checks whether the edge is straight, and it wasn't, so it cut it straight for me. And I'm getting all excited just watching the head move around and looking at the edge, and so I don't know. For me, it's just exciting. And occasionally, I don't sell my own prints anymore. I started to. They're all outsourced now. I do it from because it became a little bit difficult for me with touring and stuff if I got an order while I was away. So I've changed that, but I still love. I mean,
I imagine that once I get a printer, I'll probably be home for months, just spending all my money on paper.
So this is my test print binder. I do like test prints are all, and this is going to be very shiny, but test prints are all done at this size, and I just print for fun. So at some point, I will, every so often, I'll fire up the printer. I'll have a few images that I've shot recently that I want to just file away. And so I've got a number of these things in my storeroom at the back there. It's just, for me, it's a way of relaxing. So just fire it up and print out a few of the images that I've shot recently, let them dry up on the whiteboard there, and then just file them away. That's the same size as the prints that I just showed you. So that will go into this file at some point. It's stress relief for me.
Yeah. Oh, anybody got any other questions?
Any other questions?
Oh, I got one.
Richard's gonna have
Richard,
questions.
fire away.
Okay. Yeah, I've listened to everything you said, and it's really great. I mean, so of course I always have questions as I take notes. One of the things that I've noticed in the camera on the shooting to the right,
Yeah.
the histogram is generated by the algorithms in the camera, and everybody's camera is different. I have two D850s, and they're both different. I shoot the white to +2, and then a third of a stop down each way, and then I take them in and I find out where it's saturated, because the histogram is going to reflect what the camera wants me to see, but it's fake. And on one D850, I can shoot +2 and I still have grain. I'm at 240. And on the other one, I can't. I can only go a stop and a half and still end up at 240. So that helps in printing, right?
It does. But the one thing to check, the cameras should be pretty much the same. So there will probably be a little bit of variance, but I would check a couple of things. And one of them would be whether you're shooting, because as you say, it's based on the algorithms in the camera. That is 100% correct, but it's also taking it from the JPEG that the camera embeds in the raw file. So what you're seeing is the results of the JPEG image. And if you have, say, the camera set on one to record raw files in sRGB and Adobe RGB on the other, then that will change the results that you're seeing. Or if you have, like, I'm not sure what it would be called in a Nikon, but on Canon they have what they call picture styles, which also
Camera
adjust
profile,
yeah. So if you've got different profiles selected on each camera, then you will see something different in the histogram, because it's based on what the camera has baked into the JPEG.
Oh,
so
they don't take it off the raw.
But the JPEG is what it's using for reference. Every raw file has a JPEG, so that it can show you on the camera. Every raw file has a JPEG embedded in it, and it's showing you the histogram based on that. But then when you look at it on your computer, if the cameras are identical, then you should, even if they're not, you should see very, very similar results on the computer, because the computer is processing your raw file. And as you say, it's that, that is completely nullifies anything that you saw on the histogram that was based on the JPEG. So take a look at the other settings, like the profiles, or if you're in Canon world, the picture styles. I always set my cameras to Adobe RGB because that gives you slightly more wiggle room and helps you to get further to the right. But the other thing is I always set the picture styles to neutral or faithful, and that actually makes the JPEG look slightly flatter. It's not. If I was to put it into landscape, it pumps up the reds and the greens, and everything becomes like more Velvia looking. And I know that most of you will understand what I'm saying when I talk about Velvia. But those picture styles do change the JPEG quite a lot, and so the histogram is based on that. The other thing that I always do as well, and this is just an additional throw out for if you are shooting or exposing to the right, and that is try to set your camera up so that you're using the RGB histogram and not just the brightness histogram, because the brightness histogram is an average of all three colors. And if you've got no greens in the photograph, for example, you're just dealing with blue and red light, then the green missing brings everything down. If you were, say you had a green at 100%, red at 50%, and blue at 50%, and you take away the green completely, you end up with like with just 25% or so as an average, or something like that. But if you add that back, it actually brings everything up. So the brightness histogram is very deceiving, and it can also lead you to overexpose colors that you're not aware of. So if you are shooting to the right, try to use the RGB histogram, and you always look at the rightmost color, not everything, not the whole thing. So if you're photographing a field of poppies, red poppies, you need to be able to see where the red is, because it could be way over, and you end up then with like this digital blotchiness in the colors. Does that? I think that hopefully answers part of the question.
That's
Something to look
excellent.
for. Yeah. Okay. Great stuff.
Because the raw, I was assuming they came off of the JPEG. I was assuming they came off the raw because it's a machine, right? I didn't know where the algorithm was getting this information.
Yeah.
And then I had another question on printing. When after you do your ICC profile, if you put the blacks at 8 and the whites at 240, you're going to be okay, right?
Most of the time, it's as long as the thing is I use a slightly more aggressive boundaries. I will take my blacks down to like 1% if necessary. I set it up so that I don't even get warned about the colors being too deep. If it's from 0 to 250, 255, I have mine set to 1 to 254. So I only want to know about absolutely pure white and complete black. And I will print anything down to like 1% black and still be, but again, this is because I'm exposing to the right, and my images are generally a little bit brighter anyway. But yeah, if you make sure that you don't have pure blacks and pure whites, generally things will turn out okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Julie, you have a question about SSD drives, do you?
Traveler and Final. What brand drives are those? I know that's not the brand.
This is, yeah, absolutely. This is it's a bit grubby on the backside, but this is a Samsung. What does it say? Well, I've got my short distance seeing glasses on. An X5, Samsung portable SSD X5. And these are faster than the internal SSDs on my computers. So if you're using, if you're using if you're using the latest USB-C Gen 2, whatever, then these will give you incredible speeds.
So,
sorry, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So that's actually a timely question. I'm in the midst of transitioning from my old iMac to the new iMac, which was my question about True Tone, because True Tone I'm not familiar with because it's new. But is there, and this is actually a Lightroom question, so maybe I should direct it to Ron. I'm getting internal pressure from a certain household member to put everything on the new iMac desktop. And I'm not comfortable with that because I've been using multiple external drives. He's already set it up. I can unset it. But what are the pros and cons of having, and then having to, like for travel, cleave off a certain part of your catalog? That's my concern.
I'll start. I'll share what I do. I've been working more and more on portables since things have been moving to SSD. I've been moving away from the built-in hard drive to store my images, except I have backup drives in my big tower. That's the only thing. What I do when I travel, I actually create a folder in Lightroom. I'll drop an image in it. and then I export that as a catalog.
Oh, yeah.
Now
okay.
that catalog is what I put everything when I'm on my trip on. And when I come home, I just say import from catalog and add it back to my catalog. And it comes in with everything I've done on the trip with all its edits. And so then it lives there. Even if it's on my portable drive, it comes into my main catalog at home that
Right.
way. And so then that drive, whenever I plug it in, it'll just light up as that drive in my catalog, and I can work from it.
That
And for a
answers-
long time, I was keeping my main catalog on my main computer, but just using this folder that I would export as a catalog onto my external drive as the traveling catalog. And that just made it easy to travel and then come home and then import it back as a catalog to my main library, and it's all intact.
So that answers part B of my question. Part A is pros and cons of, I mean, putting everything on the hard drive versus an external drive. Since I've never worked with everything
Can
on
I
a hard
jump
drive.
in and
Yeah,
can I
please.
jump in and make it? Yeah. So what I would recommend is two things. One is you're probably worried about losing if anything
No.
happened to that hard. No.
Yeah, I've got
So-
redundant hard external drives, and I also back
Okay.
up. So we have we have a network and a server, and we back everything up to that.
Okay.
So,
So if you're backed up and everything's okay that side, the main thing is that over the years you will end up with a lot of
Yeah.
images,
yeah.
and trying to have the new iMacs have SSD internal drives, and
Right.
it's expensive. So if you get like a 3 terabyte SSD in there, it'll increase the price by almost $1,000, and that's a lot of extra money to pay. So I bought my iMac with like two terabytes SSD,
Mhm.
but I don't store any images on the SSD.
Okay.
I store them all in a Drobo.
Okay.
What you use is depends on your own preferences. I actually really like Drobo because I can put 5 hard drives in there,
Yeah. Okay.
and if you start off with 2, then it gives you fault tolerance. If one breaks, then you take it out and it will mirror everything back to the second drive when you put it in. But if you put 2 4 terabyte hard drives in to begin with, and for fault tolerance, you're actually only going to get 4 terabytes because it has to make a copy of everything to the second one. But if you put a third 4 terabyte hard drive in, you get 8 terabytes. And it's making space to make copies of things on the third terabyte.
Wow.
But you can then, and this is the great thing about the Drobo, is if you find that you've got 4, this is how I started out with my current Drobo. I think there were actually 2 terabyte drives at the time. But from Moore's law, hard drives they double in volume and stay the same price, or actually get less every year. So as your drives gradually wear out because they're spinning disks, you'll get failures, and you basically take it out and put in a new drive, and it rebuilds your data for you. But at that same time, what I've been doing is increasing a 2 terabyte drive to a 4 terabyte. And right now, I mean, I've actually just turned my Drobo on. I turned it off so that you didn't hear it whirring in the recording. But I'm putting in, I have spares. I always keep one spare. It's all dusty, so I'll have to, but I use Western Digital drives, and I just keep a spare down here because at some point the next one is going to break. The Western Digital red drives are great for Drobos. They're fast, but they're, I'm pretty sure this is 8 terabyte. So what I'm doing is I'm gradually replacing. I took my 2 terabytes and replaced them with 4s, and then I replaced the 4s with 8s, and you can mix and match. So I've now got, I think in here I have, I'm going to just open up the Drobo Manager and tell you exactly what I have. I have 3 8 terabytes and 2 4 terabyte drives in this. And that gives me a total capacity for saving data of 21 terabytes.
Wow.
And as that gets more full, I'll share my screen just one last time to show you this.
Sure. Yeah.
So as this fills, this is the volume. So you can see 8 terabytes, top two are 8, then 2 4s, then an 8 at the bottom. You can mix and match them, and it just takes it and builds it into one volume for you. And then as one of those breaks, I just take it out. There's a switch on the Drobo. I take it out and replace it with generally with a larger drive. Right now, my capacity, I'm over 75%. So I'll probably, as I shoot more and fill this even more, I might move to 10 terabyte drives or 16 terabyte drives because they're getting cheaper. But at the moment, they're around $200 for an 8 terabyte. So it's a good price point.
Yeah.
And I've just been dropping those in and gradually increasing the volume. And this can go up to 64 terabytes of data on one Drobo. So that's what I'm using, and I like it as a solution. It grows with you. So as you, and the latest Drobos are USB-C Gen 2 as well. So the slowest part of all this is the hard drive. The spinning hard drive is still relatively slow. But I find that as long as you're running the catalog on an SSD drive, the storage for your images can be a little bit slower. But I do all of my editing on my finals drive on this, and my Drobo is just is an archive. So when I come back from a trip, something pops up and I plug in the Traveler, and a little tool called ChronoSync pops up and says, do you want to synchronize your Traveler with your Drobo? I say yes. But everything I've shot gets synced across to my Drobo, and my Drobo is automatically then starts to upload everything into the cloud. I have everything backed up on Backblaze. So Backblaze hate me. I pay them $50 a year, and I've got like 17 terabytes of data.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's all they charge.
Yeah.
So yeah, I hope that helps.
Actually, it helped a lot because I'm in the midst of a major infrastructure upgrade, and I'm trying to figure out how to make it work.
So the only thing I would say is if you're going to use it for photographs and connect it to a new iMac, I would definitely get the wired version. Although wireless works great on the road and stuff, as an archive, I would prefer to have it wired.
We still have Ethernet outlets, so.
Brilliant.
Yeah, that's really good too, because I've been considering putting RAID over here. I'm not sure it would have saved me from a recent issue, but I love the way it can grow, and it's so much less complicated.
Yeah.
Well,
although these things, you can set the 5 bay drives, you can set them up to have 2 drive tolerance. So you can have up to 2 drives break at the same time. But that to me seems a little bit like overkill. But what I also do is, I didn't show you, I actually have 2 identical Drobos. So in addition to my cloud backup, which is if an earthquake comes and takes the whole place out, I don't want to have everything lost. So I actually have, if it's just a local disaster, as in Martin, I have a second Drobo, and I just once a month or so, I will turn on the second Drobo and sync everything from the first to the second. That's just my local backup.
That's good if you're keeping only one failed drive possibility. Yeah.
Just in case. But if something really did go wrong, I can pay Backblaze $100 a disc or so, and they will put my entire library archive onto a number of discs and post them out to me. So
yeah, that's a lot less than the $1,300 I paid to get a half a drive recovered.
Oh dear.
Yeah. If you can stop sharing, that'd be great. We'd love to see you again.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay. I do that too, especially when you have 2 monitors.
Yeah, I'm looking at all of you.
Yeah, exactly. Any other questions there? I saw Wendy had to go. I didn't get a chance to say goodbye. Well, Martin, it's been great having you. I really appreciate you coming and sharing your knowledge of printing, and even the Drobo summary is helping me wrap my head around. RAID stuff always confused me a bit, but getting my head around. I have a system that works okay, but there was a reason it didn't. I didn't verify my backups, and that caused a big headache. But I think it's highly recommended that I look also into Synology, but I believe they have a very similar system as well, where they rebuild drives. And
I've not really looked into it, so yeah, I know a lot of people that use it, so it's probably fine. Either one.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank you for joining us, and thank everyone that joined as
Thank
well,
you,
and for your
Mr.
great
Bailey.
questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Everybody, Julie, Pat, we've got
Yeah.
Cindy, and